Hi everyone and welcome back to Creator in Conversation. We're now beginning a series of talks which we recorded at the most recent Dublin Comic Con just happened last March. Up first we have Gary Erskine. So Gary I got to really get to know in the past while. Together we worked at Pulse College where Gary taught sequential art design and production. And Gary has been a frequent presence at Dublin Comic Con as well. At the show, we actually have a dedicated room. Just last March, we hosted for the first time at Dublin Comic Con DC Comic Portfolio Reviews with Brittany Hosier. And we also had a couple of other guest speakers, which will be featured here on this podcast in the near future. Now, Gary typically does a character design workshop at the TASQ room at Dublin Comic Con. This usually consists of a live demo. Sometimes he would have a preset presentation. This year we took a different approach. We actually decided to sit down and have a conversation and discuss the process, the inspiration, the methodology that goes into character creation. By pure coincidence, in the audience was Michael Carroll, who you may recall from a previous episode of Creator in Conversation. And Michael had some really insightful questions. And we're also joined by another gentleman as well, who had attended Gary's previous workshops, and he's just really enthusiastic and passionate to hear from Gary as well. So you're really going to enjoy this. This is a real treat for you guys listening in. And what's great is we adapted this conversation so it's perfect for the audio audience. You don't have to worry about missing out on anything to do with visuals. If you can, be sure to follow Gary online. He's very approachable, he's very insightful, and if you see him at a convention, definitely go up and have a conversation with him. Gary's a true gentleman. So over to Gary now, and remember, if you enjoy what you hear, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. My name's Owen Macaulay. I'm the president behind Ireland's first sequential art academy. What is sequential art? It's images in deliberate sequence to convey a narrative or convey information. We know it best here at Comic-Con as the comic strip or the comic book, but it also has adjacent fields such as animation and games. Joining me here today is Mr. Gary Erskine. Gary is very prolific within the field of comics, but has also worked in character design for games and comics as well. So Gary will be sharing his wealth of knowledge today in this pseudo workshop / podcast. If you enjoy what you hear today, I just advise you to check out at TASQ Art, TASQ ART, everywhere on social media under that handle, and you'll find our YouTube page. And our YouTube page has a number of different masterclasses and conversations like this and more, such as Kevin Easton from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Andrea Romano from voiceover acting for animation, and much, much more. So feel free to check that out. Now, typically, we've been running this type of a workshop for, I honestly think it might be going on 5 years, Gary.
Before lockdown.
Oh my God. Lockdown doesn't count. I don't count lockdown years. That's why I have my hand in my head. I don't count it. But so usually what we would typically do would be a breakdown visual presentation. In this one, we actually want to mix it up to kind of discuss more about the process. Everyone here in the audience, you're more than welcome at any stage to ask a question if you wish. Absolutely no problem at all. If there's a particular question that you've wondered about, how would you go about breaking in or working on something? What are the tools? Where do you get your... Oh, is that the bad question? Where do you get your ideas from? It's you get it in the back of a catalogue and send off for it. But I suppose to kick things off, Gary, just a little bit of your secret origin, as it were, for yourself. You've worked some amazing talent. You've produced some amazing work within the field. But were you always passionate about comics? Was comics the field you always wanted to be in, or did you discover comics later? Or
I think like most people, you read comics when you're young. You play computer games when you're young. You watch cartoons and you go to the movies. And I think for most of the people who are my age, and you can do the maths yourself, when I saw Star Wars, and when in 77, 2000 AD came out, there were other comics before then, but something in your brain changes, and you still enjoy reading the comics, playing the computer games, and watching the cartoons and seeing the movies. And but then you want to be part of it. You want to contribute. And my cousins who are around about the same age, and Chris Weston, who actually has worked on Star Wars, designed some of the work on the newer movies. Dermot Power, who's gone into the film industry. We were watching Star Wars, and when everyone else was like, I'm going to buy the toys and I'm going to, read the books and the comics, we were like, we want to buy the toys, read the books, but we also want to contribute. We want to be part of it. So there was always a love of comics, but I think there was also a sense of, how do I become part of this and do my own comics? And for me personally, I know we have a writer in the audience, but for me, it was the visual aspect of it that was interesting to me. But I think there is something that changes when you're at an age. You just want to be more involved rather in a passive enjoyment, which I still enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be more doing the thing.
No, it's really interesting to hear that you still enjoy as well. That's so important, because I keep forgetting the gentleman's name, but there once was, prior to Dublin Comic Con, there was Dublin City Comic Con. And the gentleman who illustrated Iron Man Extremis,
Adi
Granov, yes, turns around on a panel and says, I hate superheroes. And someone has turned around and said, what a great profession you chose. I think someone asked him to draw Batman. He goes, who's Batman? The one of the years, and he drew a moose, something with antlers, but it is great. It's very, like, comics. I've spent a number of years teaching in animation as well as comics, but it is very vocational, because you don't switch it off at night. It's not like you go to a 9 to 5. It's staying with you. The stories continue. And what's it like, Gary, when you first visualize these characters? So I suppose there's two ways. One is the writer describes it onto the page for you, and then you interpret it visually then as per the description. And then I suppose the flip side of the coin would be you come up with your own characters as well. So let's take it from the collaborative aspect first, which is you're provided a script or a written description. What's your process then to breaking that down visually and interpreting the words?
The actual script itself?
Yeah.
Again, it depends on the writer. Some writers will do what we usually call the Alan Moore method, which is literally describe absolutely everything in the page. And while that may seem helpful from the writer, it can actually be overwhelming, too much detail, and restrictive for an artist to put their sense of skill and ideas and what have you. The other flip side is there's not enough. The script is so Spartan. And while that maybe gives you a sense of freedom, you're there needs to be I personally feel there should be a middle ground. There should be some guidance. And working with a writer, I would, if I feel that I could add something visually, there would be a back and forth, usually by email now, or it might be a phone call, but usually by email. And you find a middle ground where both parties are contributing to the process. The script almost invariably comes first. Although there might be some artists who will come up with a character and say, this is how I think they look, and this is the sort of genre we're setting in, but I need a skilled writer to take it forward. It's a shared collaborative experience. It's kind of like songwriters and musicians. They may well be in the same band, like Lennon and McCartney, but it is someone writes the music, someone performs the music, and together, that's the band. So I generally respect the script. If I feel there's something I can add visually, I'll obviously design the characters and show how I think it will be presented. And if there's anything I feel I could add beyond that, I would certainly put it forward. And if it's taken on board, great. Sometimes the ideas are very positive. Something maybe the writer has missed, or something that just alludes to another tangent. And sometimes might say, not this time. And that is not a problem. It is still bouncing ideas off of each other. I still prefer having a reasonably full script, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, rather than plot. And I know my part. But it is ultimately a collaborative experience. And I think it should be seen as such when it comes to awards and recognition. And and cataloguing in book lists on Amazon, where invariably the author is the person who writes the book. That may well be the case in a novel, but in comics, if you had a script and gave it to 5 different artists, you would get 5 different results. And let's just say one will be very, very good, one will be very, very bad, and there'll be a lot in the middle. I'm generally in the middle. And that shows you how important, I would hope, you realise the artist is to this process. A good artist can elevate a mediocre script, but a bad artist can kill the best script ever. So everybody has to bring their best to the party and bounce these ideas back and forth.
It's always a collaborative enterprise and process, which is, you mentioned, great analogy there with music, but it's interesting how we collaborate visually as well. And then, of course, when you introduce the editorial element as well, like an editor will also have comments and feedback as well that can also help. It can sometimes help when the artist and writer are trying to communicate and meet, and then the editor comes in the middle and
I'm doing air quotes for those who listen. Air quotes, communicate. I know I keep going back to the music analogy, but it works in many, many levels. An editor's like a good manager. A manager can book hotels and get the tour bus and sort out the rider. But when there's a problem, whether it be with the plot or whether it be with the art, and I've had some editors tell me to redraw pages, and they've been quite right about that, but they can actually not just sort out any friction or what have you, but they can also steer. It's such an unrecognised part of the industry. Yes, it says book edited by, but I don't think people actually appreciate how much positive work editors can actually do to a book. Off the top of my head, I would say Karen Berger, Will Dennis, both at DC Comics and Marvel. DC Comics and Vertigo. With Marvel, I've had the experience of working with Tom Brevoort and a few others. But what they do is they will add and direct to varying degrees to the writer to say, I like the plot, but maybe just push it further in this direction or that direction. And certainly with the art, there will be a lot of potential advice. Again, air quotes, advice on this works, or have you considered drawing it from the different point of view? So editors do deserve more acknowledgement for how much more work they do, rather than just get your checks in on time, I'll send you some paper, and the more straightforward, the paperwork. They do so much more than paperwork.
Actually, so where the publisher come into all of this, who would be the representative of the publisher within the creative process? Or is there a representative? Do you drive the publisher, or does the publisher say, I want something different? No.
I think they have these retreats. There's the Marvel retreat. I think DC has something similar. And the publishers at the very, very top would expect, we want all our books to be well written, well drawn. We want the sales, what have you. And they expect the editors, whether that's the executive editors, then below that, the assistant editors, what have you, they would expect all of them to see, right, okay, this is my book or my line. What do I need to do? Who do I need to hire to further this character? And you're talking about 75, 80, maybe more years of Batman and Superman, all the titles. And they've got to think up of something different to keep it exciting. So I think it is everyone from the publishers maybe don't directly influence it, but they have expectations of what they want. But the editors and managing editors and group editors, they're the ones who are like, let's take Judge Dredd in this line, like when they did the whole aging thing.
Yep.
You're talking about characters who literally haven't aged in 70 odd years or 50 years with Judge Dredd. And they made the distinction. Actually, we have actually with us 2000 AD writer Michael Carroll in the audience, and I hope I haven't put you on the spot. What is the deal with Judge Dredd? Is it 1 year, is 10 years or so?
Dredd ages in real time. The story moves on in real time. So in 1977, the story was set in the year 1999. Now in the year, whatever year this is, 2025, we're set in 2040 something, right? Yeah. So 2140 something. Yeah. So Dredd has been enjoyed on the streets It was already 20 years, so it's nearly 70 years now on the streets.
Right.
But see, it's in the future. So they've got rejuvenation techniques.
Yeah. It's a strange thing when they age characters, because I know that I'm a huge fan of Fantagraphics' Love and Rockets, and they decided to have those characters grow up. And you meet Maggie and Hopi when they're still in a band and they're teenagers, and then they grow up to their late 20s, they get into relationships. And I have to say, I've always fallen in love with Maggie. Literally a two-dimensional character. Yeah, and when she had that little pot, she had a little pot belly when she was 30, and it was the sweetest thing. And that reality of having characters actually age and die, not or come back in some sort of weird alternate universe, but it's a brave thing for a publisher to do. There's some acknowledgement with some of the more high-profile characters like Batman in The Dark Knight Returns and what have you, and then they can do Batman Year One. It's difficult because I did hear that there was a US, I think a Marvel editor in the US, who said something along the lines of they didn't believe or like Marvel. I think it was Spider-Man. They didn't want predefined things like getting married, having children. That gives a definite flag or in the timeline. And they were very much against that because it was either before they were married or after, before they had children or after. It's too definite. But I think in some cases, the Spider-Man wedding was one that was huge. The Fantastic Four, although the little baby Ben, no, what's the baby one? Franklin can be it's like Bart Simpson, eternally youthful. But these are decisions that are made by the editors, and if it goes too far off, they then turn it into maybe an Elseworld or whatever.
It's really interesting with Superman recently, particularly with Batman. So Batman, they introduced Damien, so now he's a father, so that kind of does mature the character. Yep. But with Superman, when they decided to make him a father in continuity, suddenly it gave greater longevity, more appeal that you hadn't had in a while, because you know how Superman's kind of like real corny, go to bed, eat well, but it works when he's a father, and that dynamic worked. And for years, originally, Siegel and Schuster planned for Lois Lane to discover the dual identity very early on. There's a whole story you should look up called The K-Metal from Krypton. It was an unused last page story that Mark Waid and others discovered, and people have recorded and put it out online, has been revealed officially. But then there are interviews where Siegel and Schuster are saying, no, the love triangle is what makes Lois and Superman that unique triangle. But now we've had, I think, more years of them married than when they were single now in the continuity. And this goes to show it is a mythology, but it's also great to see what you can do with the characters if you do let them change, the impact it has. And I think Miller had the expression of Batman, he's a diamond. Like you have Lego Batman, you have Matt Reeves, the Batman, animated Batman, comic Batman, but it's still Batman, So there are things, something unique about the superhero you can do and put them through different lenses. But it really does, if you create a strong enough character, you still recognize it as well.
I think relationships are very potent in any character development, not just physically, whatever, but you see it in sitcoms like Ross and Rachel and Friends. You have that dynamic of will they, won't they? And once they do, like, or Moonlighting, Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, will they, won't? Once the characters, or Mulder and Scully, once they kiss, you've set a line, they're now in love. So what do you do? Do you continue, or do you get them, do they break up or whatever? But there's a definite before they were together and afterwards together. So it is very difficult when you don't want the characters to be this eternal, in limbo, unchanging thing. Characters need to evolve, need to change. But when you put in definite timeline episodes, then it does set things in canon, and it can be more problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
no, it is interesting. Like, and have you ever been involved in? I don't know. This might sound like a dumb question because I was going to say, were you involved in the writers' room? But is there like an equivalency of, you mentioned the retreats, but when you're working on licensed IP, particularly for big characters, is there like a Slack page or regular meet together that you have to attend to plan something out? Like all those ideas of here's what we want to go, the direction we want to go with the characters, or is it just more artist, writer, and then
Most of those retreats are writers, and I understand why. As someone who teaches sequential art, sequential narrative, and draws the actual comic books, I know, bar from a couple of exceptions, and they're very, very rare, I know that it's all built on a good story. If you don't have a good story, everything else on top of that's on shaky foundations, no matter how well it's drawn or presented. And it's the same with when you see these big, literally multi-million dollar or pound movies where invariably the bad reviews are, story wasn't that good. What? And you think you've got all that money, and to a certain degree, the cheapest thing, the quickest thing, someone with a typewriter or a pen and paper in a room, there's no sets being built or visas to get the actors to another country or building props or whatever or concept. You've literally got a writer in a room. The least trouble ever. Make sure that story is perfect, because if it's perfect, everything after that is reasonably straightforward. And as an artist, as much as I like character design and concept design, and that is the visual side of things, that is still based on the script. Because if you don't have the script, it's like a stack of cards that could fall down at any moment. So even I understand why these treats are important and why it's writers that go there. Once that's settled, then it's our job as artists to bring out the very best that we can. And, there might be a little bit of opportunity to add to that. But I would never expect myself to be called a writer. I like to have the opportunity to influence and contribute, but I still would prefer writers to do their job, because once you've got that story, my job is much easier.
Brilliant. No, brilliant. And to switch over to the second dimension then of the question that started us here, which was, okay, so this is where it's script is provided and you design the characters and discuss the character direction from a script provided. But what happens when you come up with the character yourself then? And it could be just unique to yourself, Gary, but your particular process, like when you have an idea for a character, what comes first? Is it a name? Is it a colour? Is it a logo, a symbol? Is it an amalgamation of other ideas that you've seen? Or is it just something that just comes out?
It could be a variety of things. It could, again, the more you read, the more comics that you read, or magazines or adverts on TV. Music videos used to be really inspiring. Back when MTV was a music video channel, not a whatever it is now. Anime, manga, you watch and play games, and all these ideas, a bit like a writer, will sit in your head, and then you suddenly get that moment where you think, I'd like to do something. I would say possibly genre, because that would then define it like science fiction. I now suddenly have a clear line of where I'm going. If it's a Western, I'm going in that direction. If it's horror, I'm going over there. But if it's sci-fi, I know that it's spacesuits, robots, aliens, whatever. But that, I think genre would start me off, because then I make very clear decisions about what the person is wearing, the names, the look, the culture. Working on a book where I literally was given the writer gave a lot of visual influences and written notes about what they wanted to see. But I had to then decide about the wardrobe and the furniture, the architecture, to say this is the culture of a completely new race. And that is pretty intense, because if you're doing a medieval story, you can draw on reference. If you're doing a Western, you can draw on reference. If you're doing a horror set in the 18th century, you literally look at history. But when you're creating something from scratch, and it's generally science fiction, although maybe fantasy, but generally science fiction in the future, because it hasn't happened yet, you are looking at, like I did a book, Frontlines, which was based on the Frontlines novels written by Marco Cluse, a bit like Starship Troopers, if you know that. And all I knew was that there were huge spaceships from Earth that were defending against alien ships and alien creatures from another planet. And the description, and this is nothing against writers, but basically the descriptions, they drive the story, they drive the plot, but some of the descriptions can be very, very sparse. And the alien ships, which were described as occult black, seamless, and 1 kilometre long. That's all I had to work with. And I'm thinking, okay, black, seamless, in space. I've got to give a shape so that when it's a silhouette, there'll be something interesting to look at. That was a tough gig. The creatures themselves were 3 stories high and called lanky. So in my head, I thought of these long, almost like grasshopper sort of, or insect, a praying mantis sort of a humanoid body, but long limbs. And then the head, which I did model sort of on the Queen Mother alien from Aliens, but I gave it teeth, big horse's teeth, because I thought they looked vicious. And they said, no, we want a beak. And there's a lot of back and forth, So I was literally designing the alien creature, drawing it in the story with no head. The head was literally, once we'd said, so I'm drawing the actual comic and it's getting coloured, we didn't know what the head looked like. It ended up looking like a turtle with a flange coming off its top. But I designed the exterior of the ships, the interior of the ships. I designed the uniforms, designed the badges. We did a whole line of badges that you could decide medical officer, varying degrees, and the bits like the characters themselves. I had to design a mess hall kitchen. Then there was a lot of stuff happened on Mars, and I had to think about the suits on Mars. Literally just, again, air quotes, pulse rifles. It works in a book because when you're reading it, you will imagine it's a rifle that looks futuristic. The thing with concept design is you literally have to draw it so you can see it from any angle. They're drinking bottled water. That's how it will read in a book, and you will just imagine it. But when you're doing concept art, you literally have to think about every single aspect just for the water and the mess hall and the chairs and the trays and then the uniforms and then the haircuts and the representation of the people. Then when they're in the control room, they're at a HUD, head-up display table. And I'm like, great, does it have buttons on it? Is it levers? Is it like tires? So what works in a book is a starting point for a concept artist, because in the book, it doesn't have to finalize anything. It just has to give you enough to know where you are, to orientate you. But concept design is absolutely everything that they touch, they wear, they look at. And it is mentally exhausting because the descriptions are so Spartan, and you have to make a degree of pulse rifle. Are we going like it kind of looks like something recognizable now, but a little bit fancy? Or do you go full far into the future, weird handles or whatever? It can, but that would be something back and forth. And there was a lot of back and forth with the writer on that. It's tough.
Well, as you mentioned, this concept design there and seeing everything from every different angle, that's also true of any asset creation in games, animation.
Yep.
So getting back to the transferable skills. So is that something which for yourself, like, so the way you would approach design for a comic character or asset, primarily looking at character design this talk, but we can extend to asset creation. Is it the same, or do you mix it up in your approach?
Oh no, it's very much the same. And I think this is one of the reasons why teaching sequential narrative to animation students, and I also teach storyboards to film students, comics are, to a certain degree, similar to keyframes in animation. You're choosing a moment that, in order, will tell you the story. Animation then goes further, and literally animation's 24 frames per second. So it's a comic that's very, very fast. But it's still ostensibly pictures in sequence. But yeah, comics, keyframes in animation, very, very similar. Being able to actually design characters, concept work. If you can do it for comics, you can understand so many other aspects of other creative industries, particularly the game industry and animation. There will always be character design needed. You're spending, in some computer games, you're literally spending 100 hours looking at the back of someone, not the front, the back of someone in a third-person game, or if it's first-person, you've got to make sure that those hands and those guns are really, really interesting, because that's all, it won't change the ammo. That is all you're seeing. Yes.
It's saying for the hands like that, like makeup, they can add like your
I've also seen there's a streamer that I follow. She basically goes into a lot of these deathmatch, whatever they're called, and she posts them on Instagram. And usually it's because the guys are like, "What's a woman doing in here?" And she literally pop 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 with a sniper rifle. But hers is like bright rainbow sparkle. So you're seeing this very lethal sniper's gun with the most amazing colors, and she's literally, "What did you call me?" Pop, pop, pop. And the guys run out, bang. Guys are out, back. She is insane. But yeah, the idea that these designs have to be so engaging and interesting, because if all you're seeing are hands on a gun, they have to hold your interest.
Actually, just go off topic. If you're drawing like by hand on a page, what's the best way to transfer it to a computer?
Right. I still draw pen and paper, and I basically scan it. I have one of those A4 worktop scanners, and if I'm drawing larger, I just put the top in, turn it around, put the bottom in and scan it and stitch them together. And you can do that very quickly on free software. But yeah, still black and white, pen on paper.
Yeah, that's some I work in comes that well, but like scanning software, I would be so bad.
Yeah, just use a scanner. And once it's in the computer, then you can use one of those art pens and styluses. I sometimes use that to tidy up mistakes.
What would you recommend for tidying the art?
Probably some sort of art software. There's plenty of free ones. Vita is very good. GNU Imp or GIMP is also free. After that, you're looking to have to pay. And I think Affinity is a good Photoshop alternative. And the other one is literally on 40% off it, because I'm seeing the adverts all on my Instagram feed. Clip Studio Pro. The reason that is good is because it's specifically made for doing comics. I don't personally use it, but it puts in perspective grids and you can color. It's got the borders and what have you. It used to be called Manga Studio. So they just rebranded it, but it's software purely made for creating comics, where Photoshop and a lot of the others were made for photography and people just used it. But there's plenty of good free ones. I say Krita and GNU are free and hold their own. They'll be good for scanning and touching up. So give them a try.
Does C?
No, Krita.
I always spell it CRETA every time.
What aren't unfair you?
Sorry?
Tell where the
because I draw. Traditionally, I still only need it for scanning, but coloring, and I actually still use Photoshop. But I use Photoshop 7 from 2008 because it works and it's not overblown with all the extra bits and pieces. But for coloring, because it allows pressure sensitive. You know, when you push a pen, Photoshop 7 doesn't do that. So I use that for scanning. But I use CS6, which was the last one you could buy before the monthly subscription. Now, the new ones are great, but honestly, unless you're working full-time in a studio, you're unlikely to use more than 25-30%. Honestly, it's like 3D software. There's so much that it can do, and you probably won't even find many of the tabs. You won't need them. So don't feel you have to spend all your money on the absolute top software. Try out the free stuff first. They are very, very good, and professionals use them as well. And use the one that you're comfortable with. I say I'm using a almost 20-year-old piece of software on professional work because it's simple, there's no distractions, there's no fuss, and it does the job. So save yourself some money, okay?
Yep. I'm trying out Paged. How you solve the problem of, like, is this understandable? Like, if you draw someone getting punched, do you try to knock the villain knocked over?
Yeah.
And draw him getting back up, and then you stand up then and readying his next punch.
It's instinctive. You know, if you read comics, you start to see patterns of how people draw certain scenarios. How do they draw people talking in a room? How do they do fight sequences? And you start to see the punch from behind. You don't draw the punch here. You draw the punch from here. Then you do the connecting bit here. And then you can usually break it down into 3 before the punch and then the person landing on the ground. You might have to show it in 2 panels. Gets a little bit tricky. If you're tight for space, you have to then maybe cheat a little bit, show the sort of the punch coming through and then the person flying the next panel. But it's all, if you read enough comics, you see how other artists solve the problem. And it is kind of doing your research as well. You're reading it because it's entertaining, but you're also, and like watching movies, but you're also saying, so they shot it from behind the person, so you see the punch coming towards you, or you see it from the side, like Judge Dredd punching through the helmet of Judge Fear is one of the best punches in comics. It's just the gaze into the fist of Dredd. Side view, Dredd like that, it's just one action from the left of the panel to the right of the panel. Best punch in comics. So you just see that and say, I'll use that next time.
There's also in animation, there's something exists called 12 Principles of Animation. And one of them is called staging, which is how, if you take a character in silhouette, how can you convey the action? So if I go, yes, victory, if you put that in silhouette, that can also be, I'm tired, you know. But then if I do this, that means there's no distinction of I'm tired. But if I close the fist, I'm smitten, you know. So that's a technique from animation. Check out the 12 Principles of Animation because it's all sequential art. But the difference between animation and comics is we only get to tell a single action in the page or in the panel. But staging is always a great technique I direct students to kind of, because you say how do you convey, and also look up semiotics as well. That's another one, which is how do we communicate information visually, like the skull and crossbones. If I get that in a box, I'm not expecting to open up, please God, to see a skeleton, but it might be poisonous substances or something. But semiotics and staging, they'd be, because often I grapple with that myself, and I find they help me kind of figure out how to break that down and convey.
But I agree that one of the frustrations with comics is that they are singular panels, but in sequence. And if anything, it was Scott McCloud said, you can go to an art gallery and you can see pictures on a wall, and they're all random, and they're beautiful art, but there's no connecting story, and certainly not from the first to the second to the third. And the magic, according to Scott McCloud and what I believe in, is what happens between the panels, the transition between panel 1 and panel 2. What changes or stays the same, and it's subject to subject, object to object, and the 6 of these transitions that show you, like I think there's a person sleeping, and there's a spider there on the bed, and then the spider's there, and that your brain obviously knows where it's going. Someone drinking champagne and then burping. You can also add in a third panel where it's a champagne cork popping, filling up the glass, drinking, burping. These are 4 separate panels, but it's the relationship, what happens between from the first to the second to third. So these would be key frames that would eventually become animation and movement. And I wish we could have sound in comics, but we obviously have sound effects. But there's a lot of transferable skills in being able to produce comics that leads into animation. The character design leads into concept design in film and television, even stage craft as well. Like a lot of the cosplayers that I know in Glasgow are actually doing the costume course at the Royal School of Music, Arts and Drama, to go to theatre and film. So they may well be drawing them as sketches, but rather than it being in a comic, which I would do, or maybe putting it into a video game or animation, they're literally making it. And a lot of the cosplayers know how to do something that literally doesn't exist. This is what's so amazing about some of them. They see something in a movie, like the Marvel outfits, the time travel outfits, they don't exist. They were all done with CGI mapping. So these suits physically do not exist in the real world, and they're like, a couple of screen grabs, yeah, I can make that. And they're literally walking. My favorite was the Hulk Buster in San Diego. Someone saw something that literally is just pixels and a few rendering farms in a room. I thought, bit of balsa woods, some stilts, some flashing lights. And if you look at it, I think it's about maybe 7 years ago, and it is 3 meters tall. It's got the shine and the look of something big, but obviously it's one guy, so it has to be light. So they're able to make something that doesn't exist in the real world that is practical, maybe even for theatre. Here's the Hulkbuster, and it literally, they got the noises and everything. If I was at ILM, I was like, give them the Oscar. Because they have literally created something that does not exist. So costumers, character design, what have you, can either be drawn and lead to comics and animation, or can be built. And that creativity can lead you into many different aspects of the creative industry. And if I design a character design, there may well be a part of me thinking, how would someone wear this in real life, on stage, or in a film or TV show? That might be the consideration, because you can't do CGI in a theatre or a live performance. But there's plenty of cosplayers next door who can say, yeah, give me 3 weeks, I'll get that on stage for whatever promotion. And there's a real skill in that, but it would still come from sketches and that process of the shape. The silhouette is very important as well. Colours and maybe the name, but all of these things come together to produce a character. And where that character goes is up to the project and the budget.
With regards to colour, because we kind of touched on, just to make sure, and then what I'll do is I'll end my point on colour and then throw it to you guys for final questions and such. But in terms of like the character design aspect, then how important is colour? Because sometimes, although it's a visual medium in comic books as well, if it's not black and white, colour will be the first thing that will strike to us when we see it. Then it goes into the visual. So when you're roughing out a concept on something, you might just use pencil, charcoals, inks. And then with the colour, is there a conversation with the colourist if you're not the colourist onto it? Or if you do a character design, do you give like a colour guide to the colourist for it?
I think the colouring guide would be, there are many things that can influence what the colours are. It could be, it's coding of sorts, or branding. But coding to suggest whether someone is good or evil. Coding to suggest, like if it's Game of Thrones, which family they sort of like it. That also goes into logos, because there'd be a predominant colour and then maybe a symbol or logo to denote which tribe or family they're part of. It might be coding or branding rather, if like when I do the character design workshop, to show nationality. We think about it in sport, football, athletics, what have you. People are ostensibly wearing the colours to brand, this is the country that I'm from. And then it works maybe with the patterns as well. But if you see red, white and blue, if you see that in a sporting event, you'd maybe narrow it down to about 5 countries. And it would probably be Holland. I know they play in orange, but the Dutch flag is red, white and blue. French flag, Russian, British and American. So then from there, knowing that you've got those 3 colours, you would then code some sort of pattern to suggest, like jagged triangles. That would be more the UK. So colour would be something that I would try to put in an influence before I gave it to the colours. They may well say, this doesn't quite work, maybe go for split complementary rather than analogous for these reasons. If it's a sporting thing, I'm still working on a personal project that's sporting colours contrast, because the idea is you're meant to tell the difference when they're playing. Maybe the colours are seasonal, or elemental, like Frozen, Elsa, obviously the one that has the cold powers, wears literally cold colours, where the other one is Anna, wears more autumnals. There's purples and browns and greens. That's autumnal colours. It's almost coding them to seasons. You have characters where maybe you're coding them to elements like fire or ice, or like Elsa. I would take that on board and make the first stab at it, and then raise my hand, and if the colours has any more specific influences or corrections, I would take that on board. But I would probably try and say, what are we trying to use the colour to say about this character? Because we grew up in this. We grew up on Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, showing us characters like the Wicked Witch, or this evil stepmother, and it's always black in a colour, black and purple, black and green, black and red. It's fairly obvious, but generally, characters are given and assigned colours to suggest their purity. Luke Skywalker, Star Wars, he's white, sandy colour, roughly, when he's in Bespin, turns up in Return of the Jedi in black, and you're like, what's going on here? But, and I only picked up on this later, he's fully black. But he's got a button here that when he opens it, it creates a little white flap. That's the purity coming out. Little details like that that are wardrobe decisions, but saying he's actually not going full dark side. The purity's coming back. He's reverting back to his innocence. So that's something that I would try to influence, but I would take on board what the colours had to say. And I'm sure the writers would have input as well. But it's usually where are they from, their morality, suggesting powers, or maybe even camouflage. If it's a World War II story, you don't want them to stand out like a Marvel or Pixar character. You want them to be more restrained and hidden.
See, brilliant. I just want to make sure everyone here has an opportunity to ask questions. I think to go, I did around, but is there any final questions or comments on the floor? Yeah.
Hi.
She go as I think that's right, but how do you know when you made something clear and understandable?
I think when there's no more notes from the editor. Honestly, I think there is a point where there was a character like Soyara Yaman, who was a 40-year-old mother of two, who also happened to be the commander of that starship, the last surviving starship, the Phalanx, to defend Earth from these Martian or aliens. And, normally it would be a 20-year-old, and the suit, the spacesuit that she's wearing, you hear a lot about the sexualization of female body armor, what have you. I made a point to make it look like it could be unisex. Well, it's a practical suit of armor, spacesuit. And I designed it, and she's a 40-year-old mother of two. I thought that was a very strong choice, but we went ahead, the writer signed off on it, and then it was like, how do we make this suit interesting? I think there was a general gunmetal grey, but we thought, let's colour code, let's see what colours we can add to give a sense of branding. And I think that we got it down to three. There was a dark ultramarine blue, dark burgundy, and a dark olive green, vermilion green. And we went with the blue. But that was between the colourist and I, because everything else was signed off. We just had to say, this is the colour that we think is best suited to this character and this officer. And once everyone's in agreement, then you know you've got it right. But it is a collaborative experience, and everyone will put in their little bit. They'll certainly say what they don't like, and then it's just a case of just keep going until you stop getting the emails, and then you go ahead and that's it done.
Brilliant. No, excellent question. Yeah, go for it.
There was a danger, I suspect, on being too much perfectionist, because you can redraw. Yeah, but at some point, there's the law of diminishing returns that, the more time you put in, you won't get any more good out of it. You've got to go, this is not perfect, but it is sufficient. Well, obviously, you don't want to say that too early, but you have to say with your art, with there any kind of storytelling, that we cannot make perfection, but we have to make something that goes out into the world. And the readers, the viewers, the audience will take what they will from it anyway.
Something that you can stand up and be proud of. But I wholly agree. I know exactly what as someone who has too many ideas, seen too many references, I would just, I could try out this idea. So what you do is you bank it and you save it for somebody else, because you would end up just going down a road and never finish. And ultimately you do have to publish. There's a schedule. So yeah, I think it's the best you can do under the circumstances for the time, the budget and everything else. And just be proud of that. Thanks for that, Michael. That's awesome. Spot on.
And so was there a question on this side earlier on, or did I miss something? No? Great. Okay, well, I think that kind of gets us ready for next one. We'll be starting again back here in about another 10-15 minutes with Emma Cuber for the final panelist for the today. I just want to thank again Gary for joining us. You'll be still in your table at Artisati for the remainder of the day. So if you haven't swung by Gary's table yet, he has his art book, he has his prints, and you can actually see in practice and in print the concepts discussed here today. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the podcast Creator in Conversation. It's the official podcast of TASQ Art. Michael actually is in the audience, did an episode, one of our very first recordings as well, speaking his career as a writer as well. So and previous panels in this room as well will be also featured onto it. So if you ever missed a panel, want to play it back, by all means, more than welcome. And thank you for joining us. And thank you. Oh yeah, Bruce. Yeah, sure.
just say we were here a couple of seasons ago, and we saw you then, and I could sit and listen to you talk all day.
I appreciate that. I wish my students were as attentive. No, they are. They love me. They love. No, I appreciate it. I mean, it's something that everybody knows how this works. You know, you see a new character in a comic or a video game, you say, they're a baddie, they're a cowboy or Native American Indian, they're from the future, they're a robot. Because their character design is giving you visual clues. And you grow up knowing what a baddie looks like, what an alien looks, what a mermaid. If I said mermaid, you know instantly what they should look like. Werewolves, vampires. You can tweak beyond that, but you already know. And when I teach character design, everybody knows how it works because someone has presented the right visual clues. But when you start with a blank sheet of paper, you have to think a little bit more, but you know how to draw a mermaid. You know what's expected with a mermaid. You know what's expected with a werewolf. It's just choosing the right references. So it's basically doing what you already know in reverse. The finessing is where you elevate it to an industry level.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening to this episode of Creative and Conversation. My thanks again to Gary. I'm sure we'll have him on a future episode on Creative and Conversation, or possibly doing additional classes or talks at TASQ. We definitely would love to have Gary around a lot more with the Academy. And as I mentioned just as part of the intro to this episode, be sure to check out Gary online. He's very approachable, he's a stellar artist, and he's just a fountain of knowledge and very, very passionate, as you could hear from our conversation, about his craft and the industry. So be sure to check out Gary online, and my thanks once more to Gary for taking the time out to speak with us at Dublin Comic Con. Until next time, everybody, this has been a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.